Arizona State University. I'm going to give the floor to President Michael Crow and get us underway. President Crow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and let me contextualize this both for Regents and for the senior officers of the university that are here, as well as any other spies or interlopers that are here with us, including those watching on television. This is, to contextualize this is something that was put in place as an annual presentation for the board long ago by former Regent Mariucci. This notion of what is our strategy as an enterprise and how are we operating in terms of its implementation, that is the outcome of our overall effort. I realize that this can be a little bit overwhelming. We're taking an institution with 30,000 employees and 140,000 degree-seeking learners and billions of dollars of activity and hundreds of operating environments, and we're trying to distill that all down into this presentation. And I realize that there are questions that Regents may have and do have and have expressed that they'd like to get right too. And so what I'm going to try to do today is talk through the presentation that each of you have on your table, but the Regents, and try to talk about what these pieces of information in these slides mean as opposed to what they say. That's sometimes difficult. And then second, for everyone else's benefit, I have a separate session with the board after this meeting where we'll deal with some in-depth questions in more detail. And so let me begin by starting with our economic and social imperative of the university. Now, this is known by the Regents, it's known by staff, it's known by others, but it is this notion of the fact that, and for my dean colleagues that are here and staff colleagues that are here, this doesn't mean this is the only thing that we think about, and if you think this is the only thing that we think about, then you haven't been listening very carefully. But it does mean, though, that if you take a look at this chart, the gold line slope would have been substantially greater prior to the recession 10 years ago than it presently is, even with the recovery. Dramatic shift in the economic outcome of the state of Arizona, which then leads to a dramatic change in the social outcome of the state of Arizona and the rate of social mobility in the state of Arizona. And so what we have is the notion that we as a university producing the talent for the workforce going forward of all types, from the arts to the humanities to science to nursing to business to everything that we're doing, need to do more, need to be more effective, need to be more contributory to the economy and itself. This is an alarming chart that I've been saying that there are hurricane flags up for this, and there should be hurricane flags all through Arizona, and that is the notion that our per capita GDP, the contribution on a per person basis to the economy itself, has been diminishing from the national average dramatically, even against other Western states. So it's not like something's going on in the People's Republic of Massachusetts only. There's things going on right here in Oregon and Utah and Colorado and Washington that we ought to pay attention to. And this is not a good sign. What this tells us is that we're growing as a population, and we're growing the economy at the rate of the population growth. We're not growing the economy beyond the population growth. That's a very, very, very serious social construct. Have a high poverty rate in Arizona. We've been making a lot of progress there, some progress there. But we have a high poverty rate. We have huge educational gaps based on both ethnicity and poverty that have to be remedied. And if we don't remedy this, then we're not going to have a prepared workforce. For the deans that are here and for others, this is us operating now on a social scale, the impact of the institution on a social scale. 26% of all the college graduates in the state of Arizona went to ASU. Process that for a second. And that means if we could have produced more and we could have had 30% of the college graduates or whatever, we would have had a deeper impact on the economy. This is the percentage of low-income families in rural areas is 15 points higher than Metro Phoenix. Very uneven economic opportunity in Arizona. Very uneven access to higher education. Very difficult for some students to be able to come to the university. Very difficult for adults to be retrained, re-educated, enhanced educational outcomes across the state. So our strategy, in addition to trying to be the greatest university that we can for the kids that come here and the families that send their children here, our strategy is to attack this also, to help social progress and social mobility by enhancing economic outcomes and by enabling economic opportunity to be empowered across Arizona. Our economic development policy in the past has been built on a foundation that has worked up to now and works less well going forward. The policy of low taxes, low regulatory burden, and low land development costs, we got that. It's been moving forward. It's resulted in what the slides are that I saw before that. It's insufficient. And so we think that the new economy will require access to specialized labor, access to specialized business services, and access to new knowledge from which the economy can be expanded and grown. And so our assignment is to be a significant contributor to these things. This is a sobering chart. These are the deltas, the number of new technology jobs in 10 particular sectors in metropolitan areas around the United States. And over there on this other side, you see Tucson and Phoenix, no change, no change, no change. And for my colleagues that are here from the humanities or the arts and other areas around the university, I'm not talking about science and technology. I'm talking about sectors of the economy that are hiring artists and designers and musicians and humanists and philosophers and health specialists and nurse practitioners. This is not about engineers only. We're going to take care of that also, and I'll talk a little bit about that. This is about what sectors are growing that have the highest high-wage jobs at the fastest rate in certain metro areas, and this is not a good outcome. So of the 100 or so metro areas, the Phoenix metro area, I forgot the number. Where's Kyle? Is Kyle here? Or anybody? What Phoenix metro was like 50th or 60th, and 74th, Kyle Whitman, and then what about Tucson? So near the bottom. And that doesn't mean that we don't have fantastic economies, yes? Out of 100, but lowest rate of job creation, net job creation in these sectors. No, between 2005 and 2007. But not even in the last couple of years in a net growth. So you've got other things that are happening. So you've got some parts of this sector that are leaving here. You've got sectors that are coming in, jobs that are coming in. We're making progress. We're holding our own, this would say, but we're not growing compared to competitors. This is really about competitors. So we need to invest in new kinds of industries, new kinds of economies. Again, this is not about science and engineering only. I'm trying to give you some of the fundamental premises of what we're working on. Energy and materials, advanced manufacturing, human performance. Let's just say, what is human performance? What goes around the idea of enhancing human performance, enhancing healthy life outcomes, enhancing and eliminating certain threats to the success of our children? All kinds of things. These are entire new sectors of the economy going forward. So what is our design? Obviously, it builds and starts around our charter, which is the fundamental raison d'etre of the organization, and the Regents are completely familiar with this charter and understand this charter. But just to reiterate it again, we are a comprehensive public research university, comprehensive, all subject. Not all research universities are comprehensive, and not all universities are research. Comprehensive public research university, all subject, all things. This is one of the most important cities in North America. It's one of the most important regions anywhere, one of the most important areas in the world, and it should have a comprehensive public research university. But it is one that's chosen a path different than many, as have our sisters at NAU and the U of A, and that is we don't measure ourselves by who we exclude. So the egalitarian spirit under which the institution was founded is maintained. We will maintain egalitarian admission standards, and the fundamental principle, as I'll show later, is that if you're qualified, you're admitted. If you're from Arizona and you're qualified, you're admitted. If you don't have money, we'll find it. If you don't have resources to navigate the institution, we'll help you find that. If you don't have a job, we'll help you find a job. We employ 15,000 students, likely to employ many more going forward in the future. And then I think lastly, I'll say that again, this notion of taking responsibility for the outcomes of the community. So I focused on economic outcomes in the precursor to the presentation. And that's what we're talking about right now, because if we don't solve that, we're not going to have the kinds of possible social outcomes and social progress that we'd like to see. Just to reiterate, this charter is a promise to the citizens of Arizona. It's not conditional upon the acts of the legislature. The legislature is a tremendous investor. The state is a tremendous investor in the institution. They give us amazing resources, which are fractional to the overall institution. And so this is a powerful statement. This is I think the 6th year we've made this precise statement. Our design aspirations, you've seen for many, many years, what they basically mean is this is how we design ourselves. So when people say to me, well, why is it that ASU can do this? Or why is it that ASU is achieving this? Or why is it that we're able to make this change and someone else doesn't make this change? Why is it that we've been able to create dozens of new transdisciplinary, post-disciplinary, or new disciplinary configurations? It's because we set out to aspire to achieve differentiation. The running of public universities as generic enterprises has been almost a fatal error in the history of higher education in the United States. Just create these generic public universities, just wind them up, send them out to do the same thing. A few of them become research universities, 50 or so, 70 or so, and the other 700 don't. And there are no elements of their forward progress at the moment that you would be happy about, because they've become generic. This is the uniqueness, leverage, place, this thing at the top. We embrace the cultural, socioeconomic, and physical setting, meaning we are in the northern reaches of the Sonoran Desert. We live in a desert environment. We live in a place where sustainability of the environment is unbelievably important. We live in a multicultural, polycultural place on native lands with native traditions and native creativity and all the things that we can. And if we don't recognize that in how we build and design this particular university, it won't be of the kind of service that it needs to be. You can look at this in the book. These are some of the new things that we built. My first year that I was here, there was a regent that was unbelievably skeptical and concerned about all of the things that we were doing at ASU. And so we had achieved a number of things that were, I think, significant. And there was some upsetness as to how these things were achieved. And I said, well, so we wrote a note. I can show it to you if you'd like to see it. It was the 15 decisions we made that other people didn't make. And those led to largely positive outcomes, not exclusively positive, but net positive. So these are some of the decisions that we make. A new school of human evolution and social change, a new school of geographical sciences and urban planning, a school of sustainability, a new school of politics and global studies, which are reconfigurations of our academic selves and our academic identities that then lead to different outcomes. So this is not about the management of a candy store. This is not a Walmart. It's not a candy store. It's not a business in a traditional sense. This is 4,600 faculty members, all trained at the highest possible level for the job that we have for them. And it's to find a way to try to put together those individuals in a way in which they can perform the functions that the board wants us to achieve requires design level work. It's not a job of, it's not the running of a widget company. Our product is a person, very, very complicated thing. Our product is an idea that's never been generated before. Our product is a thing that humans have never assembled, or a form of creativity that's never been expressed, or a new way of thinking about how to actually heal a person by understanding people in new ways. These are not things that are manageable by standard business logic. So how are we doing? And I'm also going to wave in here and put in some things about how are we doing and why is it hard or what's not going so well. Now, all of these little placards here, you can look at all of them. So we have this thing, this little chip on our shoulder at ASU, and even I have it now after almost 18 years, which is like, really? You don't understand what we are? Then you're a moron. And so what I mean by that is that this is an outstanding institution. All of these things are how we're doing compared to others. So I can definitively say to the regents that this is a world-class university with an elite world-class faculty operating at the highest level that any university has ever operated at. And I've been to, no joke, hundreds of universities. I've been to universities in over 40 countries. This is a world-class institution with a world-class faculty, which is fighting with every ounce of energy that we have to remain egalitarian and to enhance our public service, to enhance our commitment to the people, to reach now people not just as students, but others. And so you guys can look at these placards. So we're advancing on student success, advancing on research, advancing on financial health, advancing on what we call enterprise capacity. Now, I will pause here for a second to say, this is unbelievably challenging. So I was mentioning earlier, just a few minutes ago, to Regent Manson. So imagine you're running an enterprise, and you can't go to the public markets for capital. You can't sell your own stock to generate capital. You have to self-finance all of your initiatives going forward. So that creates then within the institution unbelievably complicated complexity or stress. So we have stresses about achievement, and I'll explain a little bit about what that means. Now, I'll just add also that if our number one focus is student success, which it is, and we now have students from the entire range of family background, which we do. We have hundreds of students that grew up homeless. We have many, many students that come from families with incomes above $500,000 a year. We have students from every ethnic background, every religious and subgroup, every group of every religion you can possibly imagine, all here at one time. And so the Regents, I mean, when you talk about how do you run that, how do you make that work, how do you help those students to be successful, in some ways nobody really knows. We're very far out on the edge of running this polycultural, unbelievably socially complicated place, trying to operate it from a foundation of learning and education and culture. But it's not easy. It's not easy operationally. It's not easy financially. Sometimes when we talk about our achievements, people think, well, they're just like all hitting, home runs. Hardly. Hardly. It's extremely complicated. And we'll spend some more time both in this public session and then in my review of assignment session on what some of those complexities are. Those students. Fantastic students. A huge motivator for me, and I know our deans that are here and our other senior officers that are here, is who are our students. It's so inspiring to see who our students are, where they come from, what they achieve, how they advance, how they move forward. Winning the Regents Cup, we're excited about that. The National Native Media Awards. I won't spend much time on this other than to suggest that here is what we've been able to do with our student body. We've been able to take a student body that is as diverse as the population in every possible way and achieve everything imaginable with that population, as opposed to achieving everything imaginable with a hand-selected group of A-plus students from wealthy families. We're achieving the same thing. Really, really difficult. And then one other complexity. So imagine, though, that you're competing. So our biology major that we produce, for which we have $16,000 or $17,000 a year to spend on that biology major, to help produce that biology major, that biology major better be as good as the biology graduate of Stanford, where they're spending 4 to 6 to 7, sometimes 8 times that, depending on the major. How do you do that? So again, back to the complexity to the Regents. How do you do that? Very, very carefully. Very, very diligently. Very, very creatively. So this basically says undergraduate enrollment is up 43% compared to 2014. This is from 03 forward. This basic chart basically says this is what our goals were that were established by the Regents. We're already exceeding those goals. We will dramatically exceed those goals. Back to the economy, we will do something that we haven't been able to do as an institution. We will greatly increase the number of college graduates produced by this institution for this economy. That will be a huge base positive outcome for this economy. Graduate enrollment up 47% over 5 years. Again, you can see on campus, online, and so forth. And we can get into some of the details here. None of this is easy. Exceeding the goal. Gray here means people of European origin, also known in our present nearly worthless nomenclature as white, whatever that means. So the institution was white, 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 white. Not anymore. Growing and unbelievably diverse. And so to our staff and to our deans that are here, they have done an absolutely unprecedented job of creating a world-class research university with high student outcomes while at the same time growing and diversifying the student body. This is an update on a chart you see every year just to let people know that people that believe that we have not figured out how to attract students from families with no income and find ways for them to graduate and find ways for them to pay their tuition and find ways for them to advance, those are people that are not truthful because it has been achieved. And this chart illustrates part of it. This is our freshman class. This tells you that we have 1,500, 1,600, we'll call that 3,100, and another 1,200, we'll call that 4,300. 4,300 students from family in the freshman class from family incomes under $60,000. 4,300 freshmen. That's larger than the freshman class at the vast majority of universities in the United States. This tells you that we have 37,000 Pell Grant recipients attending ASU right now, up from 1,000 in the last 30 years. This is a transformation of the institution. The institution is not 37 times larger than it was in 1990. It's 3.5 times larger. A fundamental social, moral, cultural transformation of the institution. And in many, many institutions around the country, when this happens, or as this happens, the performance of the institution goes down dramatically. Opposite here. 25,000 first generation, tripled since '02. So again, for those critics that are out there that say that somehow tuition is this, or there's no access to the institution, or there's no way for a Pell eligible student to come to university and graduate, there's no way for a first generation student to gain access to the institution. Not true. There's this thing called data. Awfully explanatory. We're working to keep tuition low. Just to remind the regents, we promised for the last 7 years that we would keep tuition increases for in-state undergraduate students at 3% or less. We averaged 1.7%. We then promised last year with our new structure to keep that at less than a 3% increase for the next 10 years. And senior financial officers of this institution argued strongly against that. Why would we do that? Which is a reasonable thing to argue. Because it creates then, to some questions, it creates unbelievable stress on the institution of how we're going to pay for the institution. How do you hire a world-class faculty, retain that world-class faculty, have world-class teaching and learning facilities, competing against every other institution in the country, and promise that for the majority of your students, the vast majority of your students, you're going to have de minimis to zero tuition increases for 10 years going forward. So we've built that into our logic, which then creates for us high levels of fiscal complexity and high levels of fiscal stress. Because we have to make it work to live up to that promise. We're also, by the way, you can't achieve a bachelor's degree at a university in the United States if you're from Arizona at a tuition level below ours. And this is, by the way, the stated tuition level. This is our tuition model from last year, which the Regents approved, just to remind everyone. We eliminated all the class fees, et cetera, et cetera. We came up with this tuition model. We're not going to spend much time on tuition, but this is obviously working. This is where we are, full-time tuition for new resident undergraduates within the Pac-12 conference, so we're pretty excited about that. By the way, except for Arizona, all of the others get, and Colorado, all of the others get more money per state per student than we do. non-resident tuition. So we made this promise to non-resident students that we would keep ourselves affordable also, not just for resident, but for non-resident. This is an idea of fairness. This is also difficult. So regents could reasonably say, well, charge this. Generate more money for the institution. International student tuition, same thing. These are conscious decisions. So for some of the questions, the complexity then is, where do you set these tuition rates? How do you market against these tuition rates? How do you attract sufficient diversity of students and quality of students and so forth for the university to work? This is an updated version of our slide on our financial aid structure for our 33,277 undergraduate in-state students. Everything orange is money that we're investing. Everything that's gold is federal gift aid. This is only gifts. This is no loans. This basically tells you that if you see where the line is, tuition, so basically under $65,000 of family income, students are receiving enough aid to cover their cost of instruction. You can see across the top, that's 8,000 students with incomes under $20,000. Let me repeat that. 8,000 in-state students with incomes under $20,000 family income. They have no resources. They have no cost for tuition. This is an elaborate to the point also. This is yes, exactly. 13,000 students from Arizona, more than a third, have less than $35,000 of family income. Just study this chart for a second. Now, that orange line, can't begin to tell you how complicated that orange line is. So to this notion of, our stresses and our strains, we are struggling to figure out how to pay the financial aid that makes the university egalitarian. It's not loan, cash. This is unbelievably complicated. So who'd like to add to that of any of the senior officers? Anybody want to add to that? And then identify yourself for everybody else. Rich, you want to comment on that? Or Mark, you want to comment on that? Or Jim Runn? This is Rich Stanley, university planner.
One thing I would add is that it's not just a matter of figuring out how to maintain the egalitarian standards of the institution, but all of these decisions are in a competitive environment, both within the state and outside of the state, that has to be taken into account in attracting students and helping them realize that ASU is the place they should be going to school.
Yeah, Mark. Provost Mark Searle.
I would just add that for us to serve Arizona and to take all the Arizona students we take, and we take a very high proportion of Arizona students.
Remember, we admit every qualified student, no calculation whatsoever relative to ability to pay. They cannot pay. This is a promise that we make.
And Arizona is a low-income state, and therefore the subsidy we have to provide in order to take Arizona students is enormous.
So these are no loans, and so Arizona median income is not really reflective of the extent of the poverty on the left side of the median equation. $62,000. So $62,000, the median income sits right here. So 8,100, 5,000, that's 13,100, another 3, we'll call that 16, call it round it up to 17. So let's just round that up to 20,000 of the 33,000 students are below the median income.
$11,000, like about 7,000. $11,000.
So that's the tuition. So these are the incomes down here. So under $35,000 of family income. So this is the tuition line.
Right. Oh, that's the aid.
That's the institute. The orange is the aid from ASU.
Okay, so
Grants from ASU, no loans.
okay, so what's the income line, income level? So that's 8,000 students.
That have under $20,000 of family.
So who are those families? What's the profile? behind that bar?
Well, we could certainly derive that. We understand we have the characteristics of everyone. So those are often sometimes students that have no family. They're students with families that have limited income or no income, parents that are deceased, or parents that just have low wage jobs, and that working class, working poor. That's working poor.
Parent.
Some, I don't know about most. We don't have all that data, but working poor. Kent Hopkins, Vice President for Enrollment, you want to comment on that? Use the microphone, please. Short answer. Because we're on a time constraint
Mike,
here.
basically all of the above, what you said. And it runs the gamut, Jay, of our metropolitan or our valley students as well as rural students.
So we've been criticized in the past that we don't evenly distribute the university's aid. Not true. Yes, Regent Taylor Robeson. There's the principal source of the revenue is our revenue. So we will spend yes. So we will spend about $500 million, give or take, depending on how you calculate it, of our own revenue, which means our margin position. Imagine the complexity of this. The margin position has to be able to generate a $500 million allocation. There's ways that we do this that are complicated to make that work, and then we show the private aid is separate. So some of that's in the ASU Foundation, and some of that comes in from others. So that's the blue. But that orange is, to Regent Manson's earlier conversation that you and I had, we're struggling with this. This is a struggle. It's a struggle for a lot of reasons. We believe there's still too much competition between the three in-state universities, and we could exert massive resources and end the competition, but that really wouldn't be fair to the overall objectives. And so we have a little bit of that going on. But we also just have the nature of the socioeconomic profile of the kids from Arizona that need to go to college. And so this notion of as close to free as possible, that some public officials have questioned, they never looked at any of this data. Significant design of the institution. So even with the complexity, the growth, and the diversity of the institution, here's the change in our performance. Now, we haven't hit the 90% retention goal that we have yet, but we're making steady and ongoing progress towards that through every one of hundreds of different machinations along the way. But now imagine if you have 13,000 students from families under family incomes of $35,000 a year, here's what you face. So I've sat at the table with genius students double majoring in nursing and biochemistry on full scholarships for their tuition and other scholarships for their room and board, working 40 hours a week to send money to their parents. People don't understand this. And that person, that student, I mean, this one woman in particular, she's like a saint. I mean, she just put a like a crown on her and just anoint her saint. Our graduation rate, substantial improvements, basically doubling the graduation rate. This is our graduation rate against our peers in the University Innovation Alliance. And so we began this process with a graduation rate right here. We've changed the process and become unbelievably competitive. And then unlike the University of Texas, which admits only A students, we admit A and B students. And so that's our 4-year graduation rate for A students. And that's our 4-year graduation rate for B students. So this is a transformed institution. Now, let me just ask to the spirit of complexity. Let's see, who can really add a little bit of flavor to this? Suquan, using the microphone. So Suquan is our vice provost for a whole bunch of things related to academic innovation and all these things related to this, and he's also the dean of University College. Is it easy to change graduation rate or retention rate? And if not, why?
Well, if they're really low, it's pretty easy to move up. But once you get to that point, it is very, very difficult because you have exhausted most common practices. They're essentially inventing whatever next will happen in the nation. We are at that. Whatever we do will lay the groundwork for how the nation is. Incredibly difficult.
So, Mark, what are the stresses that are caused by, like, what are the stresses that we feel? Like, what are we not achieving here? what are we achieving without, revealing all of our mortal weaknesses here, to the entire world. Hello, camera. And so, what's our challenge here?
Well, our challenge, remains not only to move the retention and graduation rates to higher levels of achievement and to achieve the goals that we've set, but to do so without regard to the economic circumstances the students come in with, and to also address any of the inequities associated with race and ethnicity that seem to associate with socioeconomic status. And so those things require an enormous amount of targeted effort, an enormous amount of focused kinds of
And does everything
things.
work?
Of course not. We try all kinds of things. We are constantly trying to
So
innovate.
what percentage of things do you think don't work?
Well, I'm not sure I know the answer to that, because as I actually told the Auditor General a couple of years ago, that the trying to pinpoint exactly what works in retention is very difficult, because what may work in October with student A may have no bearing on student A come December, but it may work on two other students with different characteristics or in combination with other things that we're doing, because we can't afford to stop, run classic experiments while we figure out whether it works, because in the meantime, there will be a lot of students left on the side who don't achieve. And so we are constantly spending an enormous amount to drive this forward, including now having built our own big data analytics platform, having had a contractor for a number of years, and now having learned from that how we can improve that, and we built it ourselves.
So again, we're producing a human product, a living thing, across these dimensionalities of complexity. And I would say there's very few, if any, universities that have gone through the number of complex changes, the complexity enhancement. So again, to our stress, and I've mentioned this to the regents before, the management of the institution has moved out of any box related to traditional management of a university and into this whole new thing of how do you make this whole thing work? How do you self-finance your financial aid? How do you self-finance your facilities? How do you then be an open institution relative to egalitarian qualifications for access and make all of that work, but without the government behind you? Numbers of degrees awarded, this is a particularly important achievement. 76% increase in degrees in 10 years. No university has ever done that at any scale. Our faculty have been innovative, creative, dynamic, and that, by the way, is also then with record diversity, record access for students from low-income families. Degrees in high-demand fields have doubled over 10 years. That's STEM, education, health-related areas. Now 10,000 graduates, enough to actually move the needle. STEM degrees itself, science, technology, engineering, or math. Dramatic increases from 1,800 in 2002 to 6,600 and going up rapidly. Huge, huge impact. Just taking engineering, for instance, so Dean Squires is here, who's managing the largest engineering school in the country. And he's gone from 4,200 undergraduates in 2009 to 19,000 undergraduates in 19, some of which are online, some of which are on campus. I think 17,000 of our total students now are on campus, give or take, and the balance are online. So, Kyle, I know you don't worry about anything, right? So what are your worries, Kyle, about making this whole thing work?
Well, we're doing two things that I often claim other universities do, one or the other. That is educating, training students from all backgrounds at scale. Okay, that's a challenge in and of itself. But it's at the same time advancing research at the highest levels, competing with the very best schools around the planet. We're doing both.
So 24,000 engineering students. So 24,000 is larger than the majority of universities in the country. So our engineering schools, we call it the Fulton Schools of Engineering, I'm just using this as one example, is larger in and of itself than most universities in the United States. And so one of our challenges, back to this notion of challenges, is how do you manage this? How do you actually make this whole thing work? So you have to break down barriers, you have to have permeability, you have to find some way to use facilities in a different way. Remember, there's no government driving us to do this with resources. We're not responding to a government that says, Please increase your engineering school to 25,000. That's the way it's done in Singapore. That's the way it's done in Hong Kong, our competitors. That's the way that it's done in Europe. Essentially all the universities in Europe, with a couple of exceptions, certainly all the engineering schools are all public. All the big engineering schools in Switzerland and Germany, they're just financed by the government. We're not. So they don't know I'm asking these questions. So Kyle, what do you sweat about? What do you worry about?
Sustainably managing our growth.
And that means?
That means finding the faculty to come in and continue to drive programs forward.
Are engineering faculty easy to hire?
They're extremely challenging.
They come from a local market, right?
If only.
I mean, they come from a national market and they expect a national wage?
And then some.
Are we competing against Texas A&M, the University of Washington, Illinois, Stanford, UC San Diego, UCLA for the hiring of our faculty?
We are, absolutely, and I think an important point to make is as we have continued to increase the level and significance of our impacts, it stands to reason the schools that you compete against for those faculty, the caliber also goes up there.
Have we lost any faculty members with $1 million signing bonuses to any famous companies?
We have indeed.
$1 million signing bonuses to go work for unnamed companies that have strange names that start with G and end with E.
Should also point out that we're attempting to hire this year alone 27 faculty.
Yeah. Nancy Gonzalez, our Dean of Natural Sciences in the college, what about science faculty? And I apologize for the others that are sitting here saying, all he ever talks about is science and engineering. Not true.
Well, our science faculty, the caliber of our science faculty and the faculty we are hiring is really outstanding, and we compete with all top universities.
But what are the stresses?
The stresses the stresses in the science faculty are, trying to advance their agenda, competing in a very, very competitive market for funding from national agencies like
what does a National Academy of Sciences member cost?
the National Academy of Science member cost
Yeah, what would it take to get such a person?
to bring them in. Oh, we'd be probably spending $300,000 or $400,000 to bring them in.
Just the salary.
Just the salary. Yep.
And then the packages to build them up?
In the millions.
Million.
Sometimes you have to buy top equipment, so you're talking $4 to $8 million sometimes.
For one person to operate at this level. So, Jeffrey Cohen, our Dean of Humanities, what about the business of connections between the humanities and everything else in the hiring of humanities faculty members? Like, what I'm after for the Regents is, this is not simple, slow-pitch softball that we're playing here. There are complexities to this in every single thing we're doing. So what are the complexities you faced?
I'd say it's a mixture of complexities and opportunities. So one of the things that draws excellent humanities faculty to want to be here are the opportunities to work with things like, for example, most recently, Lindy Elkins-Tanton's Interplanetary Initiative, where you can do the disciplinary work that you love, but you also have the opportunity to have these interdisciplinary playgrounds that you don't get anywhere else.
So let's see, Carol Basile, who's the Dean of Mary Lou Fulton Teachers College. And so came here from the University of Missouri. So Carol and Jeffrey came here from George Washington University. So Carol, what are the stresses that you feel? I want the Regents to understand that at the Dean's level, you're running one of the most important education colleges and what we call a teacher's college in the world, top 10 performer across everything that we've been able to advance at scale with thousands of students. You're running the Teachers Academy. You're running the School for Talented and Gifted Children, the Herberger Young Scholars Academy. You've got tens of millions of dollars of funding from private foundations. What are your complexities and stresses, and what makes you nervous or anxious?
That we have a global crisis in teachers right now, that there aren't enough people coming into the teaching profession and that there are too many people leaving too quickly. So for us, this has been about how do we rethink, reshape, reimagine what the education workforce can look like. How do we bring faculty in that are diverse, that bring varying perspectives, that can actually change the major systems of K-12 education with us?
So Cheryl Hyman, who's our Vice Provost for Strategic Academic Partnerships and is the former Chancellor of the city colleges of the city of Chicago, the community colleges in Chicago who joined our team. So are there any transfer students coming into this engineering operation?
There are transfer students coming in, and I think what my stresses are is how well we engage with them prior to them coming here to ensure that they are prepared and to ensure that we have them on a pathway where they're taking the necessary prerequisites and we're getting them prepared for the rigor of this program.
So, research. Now, this is a funny area. Remember, we're not supposed to be a research university. So one of the things that I was told was that when I first got here was that we're still struggling to emerge as a research university. And we had emerged at that point. We were on the beach, but we had not yet moved into the front rank, right up to the front line of science and engineering. And so we work in all kinds of spaces. I send all kinds of things to you. We have, Panch, how many individual projects? 11,000 that are funded externally? Tens of thousands. And then how many proposals do we submit? To complexity, by the way, thousands of individually funded projects. You can't begin to imagine every single one administered uniquely, often administered under a separate contract, often to a separate funding agency, all of which expect the same kind of auditing and accounting of everything you can imagine, all of which there are results to be handed out. How many proposals? Use the microphone.
I don't want to end up causing headache for people with my voice.
Yeah.
So to put it in terms of dollar terms, close to $2 billion of proposals last year.
And most of them lose.
Yeah, many of them lose, of course.
Most of them lose.
Yeah.
The vast majority
Yeah,
of them lose.
yeah.
And so then into the built structure of the institution, only 1 in 6 of our proposals are actually funded. It is an unbelievably brutal field of competition. And so again, this is not the way that companies work. They don't compete against others for resources per se, in which you may have the best idea, but you may have lost out for some other strange reason, including politics. So we have great researchers. These are 3 people that have been hired in the last year or so. Craig Calhoun, who's at the rank of University Professor of Social Sciences, appointed in all these schools. He's a polymathic mega thinker. If you just read his stuff, it's just unbelievably inspiring. He's the former director of the London School of Economics and the former president of the Berggruen Foundation. And Pardis Madhavi here, who's just come in to lead our School of Social Transformation. Unbelievable background, unbelievable set of experiences, just a fantastic addition to our faculty. And then Greg Asner, standing behind the plane that we now own, is funded, where's Libby? It's funded by how many foundations? I think the last count I had was like 40. So Libby Wensar, Dean of Social Sciences.
Yeah, he's funded by probably 40 foundations. He's privately funded for the most part. He doesn't usually seek federal funding for his research, but he's very active in working with like the DiCaprio Foundation and a lot of Hollywood foundations. He's very integral to that circle.
So he's a single faculty member. So I want to talk about stress and complexity, and I'm going to pick on Greg. So Greg is running a unique set of scientific instruments embedded into an aircraft that have the capacity to image and 3D image physically, chemically, and biologically, to some extent, things like coral reefs under the ocean, which makes him unbelievably popular at the moment. He's self-funded, self-guided, driving on his own thing, and he needs support from the university in the tune of project support, project development support, fundraising support, high-performance computing support, technical support, purchasing of all these things, and so forth. And the point here is that to this notion of complexity, this dude himself is unbelievably complicated to manage, to deliver what he needs to be successful. So who in the room has met with Greg?
Many times.
How many times? More than 5. More than 10. Me included, with one faculty member of 4,600. So one of the other complexities of universities is this notion of the unique faculty member. And it may be a great researcher like Greg, who's also a teacher, but it may be a person completely dedicated to teaching outcomes And these are individuals who are not like regular employees of regular organizations. And if you don't get that, and if you ever try to treat them like a regular employee of just a regular company, you're finished. And the university won't be successful, and you won't be the dean or the leader for very long. You'll be booted by them. The way it works. Because you won't be able to be effective. So researchers, just goes to the notion of numbers of proposals. So the transaction complexity of the institution is unbelievable. 3,000 proposals. 3,500 proposals to every kind of organization imaginable, not one of which operates in the same way. The rules at the NSF are different than the rules at NASA. They're different than the rules at DARPA. They're different than the rules at the Navy. They're different than the rules at the Piper Charitable Trust. None of them are the same. And so it's not like, oh, well, we get this money from the federal government. There's no federal government giving us money. There's individual transaction. This is how we're doing against these. So we weren't a research university until 1994. We weren't recognized as an R1 university until 1994. This is the fastest growing trajectory of any research university in the U.S. Our number will be 641 that we just reported to the NSF for the year that ended. I'll call on Panch to comment on this, and I'll call on, let's see. Panch, why don't you start while I decide who I'm going to pick on next? I'm going to pick on Dean Chris Boone next.
Yes, no problem. So this is the fastest growing research university year over year for the last 10 years, period. You're going to see a graph on that. There's one spike in that in the, you'll see in the next graph. But what I want to draw attention to is what Michael said. You know, while the federal government expenditures on research has been flat, you can call it over the 10 years, 12%, right, or less than the index of inflation. ASU's growth with federal funds alone is 48%.
Yeah.
Just think about that for a minute.
But Panch, I'll take it as a given that the regents believe that we figured out how to do this. Now, what are the stresses? What are the complexities? What do we worry about? Where have we failed? What hasn't worked?
Well,
I want you, just before you become the NSF director, just before your confirmation hearing in Washington, I want you to tell me all your failures, guy.
In public, that'll be great.
The camera's right here. I'll just turn it right around to you. So speaking is Setharaman Panchanathan, NSF designee. Panch, what are your failures, buddy?
So where do I start? So several. See, the thing is that the challenge is to get every faculty member to be as productive as they can be. When we talk about the stresses in the system, now imagine these faculty members are delivering the unbelievable quality instruction at the same time as we are expecting them to do the research. So, which means that you have to surround them with support that is, unimaginable to be able to be successful. So we are not able to keep up with that because the resources simply are not there to be able to surround them with the level of support that will be required.
We often laugh that if we actually had the resources that we wish we had or that our competitors had, think of what we could do then.
This will be $1 billion enterprise already. So that's a huge stress for us. The second thing is we are competing in the marketplace to attract some unbelievable faculty like the Greg Asners of the world. It is not possible without resources to attract them. These are unbelievable quality researchers, National Academy
Do we get
members.
all the people we go for?
Yep. Oh, how many people? How many? I mean, Mark, Michael, and I spend.
No, but how many people? How many? We do not succeed all the time.
Yeah, 80% of the time we don't succeed.
We fail often.
Yeah. So we therefore redouble our efforts in terms of going for not 10 but 20, with the hope that we will not get 2 but 4. So I mean, that's how hard it is. It's how hard it is to get really solid people. I mean, these are people who really believe that ASU is the place to be, but they also know that we are resource constrained.
How many major crushing defeats have we had of projects that we spent millions of dollars to pursue? How many?
Tens and tens of projects at a scale of $50 million scale projects. And this is because of the fact that there are several challenges that we have. We as a state are not able to, as an institution, not able to put in the matching funds that is required implicitly or explicitly to be able to compete with other universities, other states which are just dumping money the moment they know. I mean, National Manufacturing Institute is a very good example. The Energy Hub is an excellent example. We come, despite those, I mean, it's unbelievable. The quality of the ideas are so superior that we come second. So
Yes.
this is just very painful for us.
So this is the chart of how we've done. This is the addition of the medical school to Indiana University. That's why their number went up, and that's common. Medical schools are a big part of they didn't have the medical school, then it got added to them. You've seen these charts before. Anybody that's on here is somebody in that particular category that we beat. This is our stress here, for those of you that want to know what our stress is getting people to believe this or to understand it.
Michael, can I say one thing?
Yeah.
On the second item there, the submission that we made just now that Michael talked about.
Yeah, this is for more than a year ago.
Yeah,
right?
more than a year ago. And so we will hit the top 5. This is huge. Now we're talking about MIT, Berkeley, Georgia Tech. That's the class that we are in right now.
That's where we are. So we've built that. Now, the stress of running that then is that once you're in that arena, the nature of your faculty becomes such that they are then picked off. So any dean that wants to talk about retention, the stress of retention. So who wants to talk about that? Let's see a hand. Chris Boone, talk about retention.
Retention of faculty?
Yes.
Yeah.
How do you do it, and how is it stressful, and what's involved?
Well, we
Chris Boone
as
is the dean of the School of Sustainability.
And as Kyle mentioned, we compete on a national and international marketplace for the very best faculty. And because we were the very first school of sustainability, and there's now 800 plus programs across the United States alone.
We were number one, 700 more, 800 more evolved after
We
us.
are constantly trying to, others are constantly trying to poach our best faculty. And so we need to put together opportunities to make staying here as attractive as possible.
So what's involved in that, and what's the stress of that? Because again, we don't have a government saying here's 5% more resources this year for your mission. And yes, like in Texas, where the governor has Nobel laureate attraction dollars in his operational budget to give to any university president. And my counterpart at Texas A&M has an $80 million a year flexible investment fund. So the stress is the stress of competition. The stress of competition. So what do we have to do to retain someone?
So in some cases it's salary, in other cases it's providing facilities.
Well, what
and
kind of
those
raise would we have to
facilities-
give to somebody?
It can range. It might be anywhere from 10 to 20, even 30%, sometimes higher. The more difficult
You might have to give
challenge-
someone a 50% salary adjustment to match the salary or exceed the salary of the other institution, as well as
Nancy was talking about earlier, providing people with the research facilities that they need can be very expensive. It might be $1 million or more to be able to retain someone.
that's
order to give
from
the
them
facilities that
already
they
being
need.
in the institution. They show up one day and they say, hey, look at this little thing I got. I got this letter from Penn State that says they think more of me than you do.
And the stress is that the pies, we need to take piece of our pie, which we would otherwise devote for other purposes in order to retain the very best faculty.
Right. So these are all great outcomes. I think the most important one, or one of the most important ones to me, is how are we performing against others? 592 schools got funding from the National Science Foundation. More than a year ago, we were 21st. We'll be now in the top 20. Maybe 17th or 18th, we think, is where we'll be in the data that's just gone in. You might see there's some A's on there. And that's not meant to be rivalrous. That's meant to show all grown up now. All grown up. Competing on the same field at the same level in the same way. Please stop thinking that that's not the case. Financial health. This is our most significant area of complexity and stress within the institution. The colors here, shade, you've seen this before, where we were in 09 with our financial mix, where we were last year in 19. This is not this year. You can see the revenue shifts, the category shifts. Black is state appropriations or public investment. All the other things are something else. So Morgan Olson, the EVP and CFO, what's our most significant stress, as you see it, in terms of financial management?
I think it's probably balancing all of the things you've been talking about in terms of our mission and the things we need to accomplish, including making sure that our students have access to an affordable education, and yet doing the things that we need to do to ensure that we have financial equilibrium and sustainability over the long term.
So I got this phone call, actually like a Skype call from a counterpart of mine down in Australia, and so he has a small problem right now. So 12,000 or 15,000 of his international students are from the People's Republic of China, only they're not in Australia yet. And they have no way to get to Australia. It's a $600 million number for him. Because his university operates in the market like we do. So I'll ask Kent and Mark to comment on the following question. How often do we assess and adjust our strategies for recruitment of students outside of Arizona and outside the United States? How often do we talk about it and make changes and adjustments?
About every 2 to 3 weeks at the longest. Kent, you want to comment?
I was just adjusting right now. Well, no, serendipitously, we had a 9 o'clock campus visit. We had families here from Shanghai, families who work for
Today,
who I actually met during ASU Week in China. Serendipitously, the father works for GM. They left Chinese New Year and they can't get back. Their daughter is a second-year student here at ASU.
Are we selling them a house or getting them a
They have a
house?
high school senior. She'll be a student here.
But the
It's
key,
about
the question is how often do we constantly? So Morgan, anything else you want to add?
Not yet.
So I want Maria Anguiano, our Senior Vice President for Strategy, who's been the CFO of UC Riverside, who's been in the private sector for a number of years, and so has been introduced to us coming in from University of California system, both at the system level, the college level, as well as the private banking sector, as well as the auditing sector, as well as the private educational sector. And so what do your new eyes see relative to our complexity? And a region of the University of California also. And presently, you can ask how that's the case. It's just miraculous. Yes, so Regent Anguiano.
I think the interesting thing is when you see the blue sections, right? We are now operating as very much as an enterprise. It means we're not relying on our resources to come from an outside entity, but have to go after each dollar individually, whether it's tuition, research. We talked about all those things. So I would say that's the fact that everyone's got their brain around the fact that we have to do that is very unique.
So what do we talk about around our tables that you've noticed that is different than what were talked about at other, just generically speaking, other tables in the public university sector that you're familiar with?
Well, we talk a lot more about innovation, obviously, and the technology it's going to take to make sure that we keep our cost structure at a level that remains affordability. And then I would say, again, back to the going after every opportunity in a much more aggressive way.
So I'll also call on Christian Osmina over here, who's a very recent appointment to the university. He was most recently the CFO of the California Community College system, and prior to that was the budget examiner, I guess I would call it, or head of the higher education budget office in the state of California's budget office, and prior to that was a deputy chief of staff in Governor Brown's office in the state of California, focused on a lot of things. And so, Christian, you're like brand new. You just show up to Arizona from Sacramento, and you're like, we plop you into your new job, working as a part of Maria's and Rich's team, vice president level within the institution. And what do you experience? Like, what are the stresses that you feel within the organization? And so, to Regent Manson and others, so this brand new senior officer of the institution shows up, and so, what are the stresses for both the regents and the public?
So I think if this were the University of California, the bottom line would be probably right now $4 billion. Of the tuition revenues, about $1 billion is paid for by a state financial aid program. Then you've got a state bond program that every few years gives billions of other dollars. So you see the state who, a university who's relying on state appropriations far more than this university is, and who is not facing the stresses of having to devote those blue bars to kind of managing basic costs of the university.
So $1 billion of the tuition revenue in the system is publicly supported by the state. The capital is supported by the state, not exclusively, but heavily, as well as a substantial investment on a per student basis from the state. The stresses, so what are the stresses that you feel here, that we feel when you watch us as the newest bug watching us in the room.
Figuring out where that new, which other universal learner can be enrolled, what kinds of offerings can we provide that student that's beyond potentially even degree granting programs.
So then at the dean level, let's talk to, where's Pat Kenny? There is. So the senior dean, the dean for all of what we call the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences. So what stresses do you feel financially?
Well, I slept fine last night. I think I'll sleep less well tonight after this. But the main stress we hit are the ones you're talking about there. That is to maintain the high faculty support that needs to be done in order to teach a very expanding student body both on campus.
So we're expanding the student body both for access reasons and financial reasons. That is to both help the university to fulfill its mission and to have resources to fulfill its mission, for which we need to expand the research and teaching faculty and the scholarly and teaching faculty and the teaching support faculty, all three types of faculty.
Yeah, so that equilibrium is very difficult to figure out, especially when the variables are so dynamic. So in one year, we might think we're in that zone a little bit, and then that'll shift across the time in one variable or another. There's several at play. I think that's the biggest.
So here's an example of that. So the two are sitting right here. So Kyle and Mark, a couple years ago, something happened in engineering, and Mark told me something along the way, and then budget folks told me something along the way. Somehow we ended up with less students of a certain type than we thought we would have, but we'd already committed the budget, so we're now operating in real time. We're not waiting for like an appropriation and arguing for the appropriation, then planning the appropriation, then spending from the appropriation. What happened in that case, and what did we do, and what did it cost? And I don't even have to tell them what it is. They know.
In fairness to Kyle, it was his predecessor.
Whatever. But he inherited the problem.
Yes, he did. His first year on the job. They went through an earnest process of at the different schools in the Fulton schools, looking at enrollment management and issues, and they were making independent decisions, and nobody was elevating those decisions to a higher level. The net impact was that they reduced the number of international students they took and cost the university $16 million.
At the last second, which had to then be eaten, and then eating it then causes what?
A great deal of hardship in terms of trying to impact hiring. It impacts everything because we don't have those resources.
Well, hiring, we probably already spent half of it.
Yeah.
Yes. So, Regent Russ.
President Crow, could you elaborate a little bit on why the fees in summer session block in that bar graph is so much larger than any of the other tuition blocks?
Who wants to take that on? Fees in the summer session, while they're so much bigger, that it's probably color blending here. There's probably a lack of color precision, but somebody want to take that on, Rich? Why does the summer fee, that's fees?
Yeah. So remember, this is FY19 numbers. This is prior to the change in the tuition structure, to the tiered structure, in which many of the class fees and many of the some of the technology fees, those kinds of things, got built into the tuition numbers. And so, when you look at that number in FY20,
which is the year
it's
we're
going
in,
to be it's going to be just as
large,
but it's going to be recognized as being tuition, and something which a student and a family can see much more clearly when they're making a decision about enrolling. The other thing is, I think next time we do this, we may want to make summer session a separate line item, because that really is a very different thing than class fees or program fees or the student directed fees. Summer session probably makes up about, I'm going to remember now off the top of my head, something in the range of $150 to $200 million of that blue line. And so I think that it's really not at all the same thing.
Mark, you were going to add something quickly?
Well, just fees in summer session is fees and summer session tuition. It's
right.
all there. That's not just fees.
Right. So interestingly, and I know you weren't suggesting this, but so through the years, the 17 and a half, almost 18 years have been a part of this institution, there's been this obsessive focus by the regents on tuition. Obsessive. And so we said that we would make the tuition work. We would make the university accessible. The university wasn't accessible when they started asking those questions. The university is accessible now. The university is successful now relative to graduation and retention rate. And there's this focus on tuition, the stated price to attend the university. And so All of this revenue, from this all the way to here, which is huge within the institution, it is the resource for the institution. We gather the resource from those that are purchasing the service, and we help those that can't afford to purchase the service to purchase the service. So, you heard Gretchen Buehlig's report yesterday as Regents. Fantastic report. This is how we're doing relative to fundraising, and she's a fantastic chief executive for our foundation. Morgan, you want to explain what this chart says?
Sure.
What it means and what are the risks here?
Right. So net position is accountant speak for net assets. And so what that basically means is over this time period, roughly the last decade, we've been able to double our net position, or the strength of our balance sheet, the growth in our net assets. In fact, we've had 14 straight years where we've increased net position annually. And if you recall that happened over the period of what we now call Great Recession, I think that says a lot. I did want, as long as I'm talking, I did want to make one other comment that I think ties in both here and to the point President Crow was making earlier. Our state investment in ASU's operations back in 2008 was about $480 million. Today, that number is about $340 million. If you think about how enrollment has grown over that same time period, I think there's a pretty interesting contrast in terms of our business model and how we think about access to higher education. If you compare us to a lot of our peer institutions, Florida or institutions that are similar in Texas, or certainly the UC system, their approach would simply have been to, well, we're simply not going to admit any more students. We're capped. In contrast, what we try to do is figure out how we maintain and, in fact, increase access because of the needs of our state to higher education, which you asked, what do you worry about? That's a little more detailed description of some of the things that create pressure for us that we work really hard to try to figure out in a way that provides access to a high-quality education.
So we're like a market-driven enterprise that has to be unbelievably efficient, developing a margin which is not distributed to shareholders or to investors, which is largely reinvested back into people that can't pay to attend the institution. We have to operate, this is our main complexity, we have to operate as a public enterprise, market-driven institution, fulfilling a public mission with no source of capital. And the stresses that come from that are palpable. And luckily, the team that's here on the financial side, Morgan and his shop, Joanne Wamsley, who's here, and the rest of his senior team that are helping to run the institution, and the new strategy team that we have at the enterprise level, which is getting up to speed and moving forward. These are the teams that help us to be able to figure out how to do this. As the academic leadership of the institution then is advancing to produce these kinds of academic outcomes. And so I'll repeat something I've said to the Regents in the past, and that is that if you try to run this institution as a business, if you replace me at some point with a business person or a non-academic oriented person, the institution will fail. It will fail. Let me repeat that again. It will fail. Because at its heart, it is an intellectual enterprise driven off a set of cultural objectives for which one has to then also operate as a financial enterprise like a company. And the balance between those two things is almost unattainable. So that is a stress that our management team has figured out how to manage most days. Most days. And that's a very serious managerial complexity that I've been telegraphing to the Regents. So, by the way, we use 21% fewer resources per degree awarded. This should be known and should be commonly touted, including against others within our own neighborhood. Again, this is without medical schools. This is a very important chart. I mentioned this yesterday to the Regents. And so this was our cost, our expense net of scholarship per FTE. This is by ABOR's methodology in 2008. And then in 2008 dollars, or adjusting for inflation, at that percentage rate, we've driven our costs down. You cannot do that in a normal academic institution. In normal academic institutions, there is no cost control, particularly private universities, like the one I came from. There is no ability to constrain or control costs. Tuition will rise infinitely. So we have figured this out. So let me see who can comment on this that hasn't spoken yet. I'm going to go back to Morgan. So Morgan, how do we lower costs?
Well, there are a number of strategies we use. I think the chart here is pointing out one of the major ones, and that's leveraging technology. So certainly in terms of what we're doing with Ed Plus and ASU Online is an example, but application of technology in the classroom, adaptive learning as an example, is proving to be pretty powerful, particularly when you need to operate at the scale that we do. You have to figure out ways to break the cost curve. Otherwise, if you just project your current cost structure out, it's going to grow at least at the pace of your enrollment, and the business model doesn't work. So what we try to do is look for ways to change that cost curve. The power of partnership is also extremely important to us. We've talked about that previously.
So
That's
technology, partnership, innovation,
but also in terms of some of the things we do with providing infrastructure, energy infrastructure, student life infrastructure
right.
being two primary examples. Those are all things that help contribute to these outcomes.
So then let me come back to the regents. And so what you saw yesterday in some of the briefings that we had on the ASU Online configuration and so forth and so on, that technology platform, we iterated yesterday, and I'll reiterate now, that is as important for the on-campus learning environment as it is for the online and the open scale environment, for all of those environments. And so it turns out that you all are governing the most technologically advanced university in the world. That's us. We have become that partly because we wanted to and partly because we had to. We had no other way to do this. Now, the risk of all of that, again, to you all as governors of the university and regents of the university, is you better have a management team that's technologically savvy, or you will fail. Immediately fail. Within the culture itself of academia writ large, or more broadly, technological empowerment of the university at its core is not yet a common thing. Assets, tools, yes, but to the extent that we have, no. So I'll pick on Jeffrey again, since Jeffrey just came from another university, George Washington University, and just, are there any technological differences here? And I'm going to pick on Jim O'Donnell also, who was provost for many years at Georgetown University before becoming our distinguished university librarian, and by the way, delivering this fantastic facility that we're sitting in, which is really fantastic. So Jeffrey, technology at ASU versus technology at GW. And GW is a fine university and it's doing great things, but it's not the same kind of creature. So technology.
No, it's not the same creature at all. And it's interesting. Just before I left GW, we were in the news because when we tried our hand at continuing professional education in a way that ASU is so good at, we got in trouble because it turned out mostly we were throwing PowerPoint slides up on the internet and asking people to do a kind of correspondence course around them. So it's a completely different world what happens here. And I will just say I work a lot with our online students. Many of them are from our local, they're Native American students, live on local reservations, and it's been transformative for them to have access to, for example, in the School of Sustainability right now, the former provost of Oxford is teaching an online course on
we just hired on our
sustainability.
faculty.
We just hired Sir Jonathan Bate.
We only hire former provosts and former deans. So Jim O'Donnell, former provost at Georgetown, this is just like Georgetown, right? We have the same mission, the same purpose, we work the same way. So.
Well, we're a little larger here, and we do have access to data. I'm impressed by the ability of our provost, who knows that I continue looking at him saying better him than me for these tasks, to manage the data about student success in particular that we had simply nothing comparable to it.
So let's go to Stephen Tepper, Dean of Herberger Institute for Design and the Arts. So student success and data, and you came here from Vanderbilt University and you were educated at Princeton, and so how's ASU different relative to the operation of your college?
Faculty matter here.
At those institutions, the students are already on a trajectory of success, and they really just want us to get out of the way. And here, we actually are the transformation for them in their lives. So, we have to be all in. And in design and the arts, we have 6,000 students, which is the largest in the country. 55% of the freshman class are non-white. And arts and design colleges tend to have more trouble than the sciences recruiting underrepresented students. So we're doing something right here, but those students come and it's a 24/7 hour commitment to them. They're building, they're making, they're designing, they're performing, they're presenting, they're working intimately with faculty.
And how does our technology platform and all the things that we offer help that to occur?
So we have to figure out how to scale that kind of education. It's very intense. We figured out how to do that. We offer the first digital photography degree. It's a studio-based degree. We have over 300 students. That's only been open for 2 years, and it's
300 majors.
300 majors in digital photography. A student will produce a piece of art. They will submit it. A faculty member will review it on camera, pointing out specific things in the composition, its texture, its color, send it back to the student. They will redo it. So, we are figuring out how to use technology to teach what people said could never be taught online.
So I'll also say that Stephen is the dean that's on point for the new Mesa City Center for ASU, as well as, and I haven't heard back from the provost or the dean yet on my thinking about where we're going to take the film school, but I know I'll hear it eventually, right? And it will operate in more than one place, Phoenix, Mesa, and Los Angeles. And so to give you a sense, we couldn't do any of those things without these technology platforms. So I'm going to fly through these. Basically, the way to read each of these slides is that you guys have selected as Regents peers for us, UCLA, University of Illinois, Rutgers, Penn State's main campus, Ohio State's main campus, Michigan State's, the kind of schools that we're now operationally at the same level, raising more money financially from donations than these schools in general, doing fantastically well relative to graduation rates and retention rates in general, et cetera, et cetera. And so the maroon line is the median of the peer for whatever it is. So FTE employees per 100 students. People keep thinking like we're going to run amok or something. We're not running amok. This is where the median is for the peers. This is where we are. So please, I'm really, 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 if you want to talk to me about efficiency, go talk to them about efficiency. This technology platform that we have, the structure that we have, the way that we work, the scale that we operate at, means that we are operating at a very efficient scale, which, by the way, is unbelievably challenging. We have to produce the same quality or better quality graduate with fewer resources. You want to talk about stress. You want to talk about complexity. Every dean that we have, every director of every school, every chair of every department has got to be an innovative thinker or they can't operate here. So people say, ASU is so big. They've got so many things that they're building, and all these things, half the buildings that people are looking at aren't even our buildings. And so this is the number of square feet we have per full-time equivalent student compared to our peers. Our space, own or operate. So now, our style of operating that most of you have figured out by now is to operate as a public enterprise. So this is what the Novus Innovation Corridor will look like when it's done, approximately. So this will be a new athletic facility that we'll be proposing at some point. This is a hotel under construction, a parking structure under construction, office buildings under construction, apartments under construction, all under construction now. These other buildings over here are already done. And so it's still the funniest thing for me is that people don't what does enterprise mean? Enterprise means we use every asset that we have, we use every resource that we have, we use every partnership that we can find, we use every means that we can find, we use every deal that we can find to make the institution work. And when that thing is done, it will have thousands of people living there and thousands of people working there. And those people working there will be connected to us. So we're continuing to build and continuing to move forward. I'll just reiterate again, you can see the slides. Santana in the middle, that's Doug Becker, now our partner, both an investment partner and other kinds of programs that are going on. And he's a world-class, highly capable person that has been building universities around the world for decades. He built the Laureate Corporation, and we've been moving around, and we are his partner. He has invested in this company, Santana, headquarters of which is a few hundred meters from here. Tens of millions of dollars of investment, world-class team already assembled here in Phoenix, and we will be the partner in a number of international areas that we're moving into. So you want to talk about complexity. So since we have this technological capability, since this technological capability can be projected, since it can be projected into places where people want higher education, since we can project it there with no additional sweat off our brow and generate income with high margin to then reinvest back into the institution, that's what we're doing. So Stephanie Lindquist has been recently appointed to the new position of Senior Vice President for our global academic initiatives. So just for the Regents, Stephanie, using the microphone, where have you been in the last 12 months and working on what kinds of deals?
Okay. Well, I just recently was in Istanbul, Turkey. That's the most recent trip to investigate a university there in connection with Santana. Also in Egypt. We'll be going to Kazakhstan, Colombia, Costa Rica. So all over the world, China. The idea, of course, is to extend ASU's reach through this partnership with Doug Becker and the former employees of Laureate Education. And while I have the microphone, President Crow, if you don't mind, I'd just like to sort of reiterate or emphasize the importance of our global mission and to really emphasize to this group how impressive people find ASU around the world. So just yesterday, we were on a call with the State Department. They're planning a very important global event, and it's just ASU and Stanford. Those are the only two universities that they're talking to in terms of building this event.
And who was just in our office just the other day from Cairo?
Well, we hosted the Fulbright Board, and along with the Fulbright Board came Marie Royce, who is Undersecretary for Education and Educational Initiatives at the State Department.
And then right before that, the Minister of Education from Egypt was here with his team.
And that's also something I think is important, is that ASU is actually a topic of conversation with world leaders. We had the Minister of Education from Egypt here. He's interested in ensuring that ASU programming can be accessible to Egyptian students. And as you probably saw recently in the New York Times, Egypt is experiencing quite a growth in young people who need education. And so they look to us as an example of a university that can scale. And he was immediately going back after he met with us. He was extremely impressed with ASU to go back and talk to President El-Sisi about how they can support ASU's operations, however that might be configured in Egypt.
So the mindset for Regents is that this is a university. Yeah, it's also a public enterprise operating to acquire, basically emerging from Arizona is a first of the kind type of public university, able to acquire resources, build partnerships, link with others, change the world, hook up with parts of the world that we want to see things happen with or in, and then use all of that also to the advantage of the people of Arizona. Because we need resources to run the university. We need partnerships to advance the economy. One of the reasons that the economy, starting off with the original slides, is not what it might be here, is that it's too insular. Real estate is fantastic, as all of us know. It's not productive or sellable as an export. And so we have grown also into a service enterprise. Learning is the service. Santana is a learning as a service management company, allied with us, venture-backed as a public benefit corporation. Through enterprise partners, we have an equity stake in that entity. We have a role within that entity. We have partnerships with that entity. And our faculty, through their ability to be technologically projected, have the capacity to help educate others who don't have access to the kind of education that we have, and then generate revenue. The risks with that? Non-trivial, but luckily we find other people to risk their capital. Santana is risking its capital. Tens of millions of dollars and many more once they get these things going. And what did they just spend, or what are they going to spend on the one university that they're acquiring? $50 million?
Yeah, I mean, tens of millions of dollars to build these universities.
Yeah. So that's not our capital. What we bring to the game is talent, drive, ambition, and technology, and our values. That's what we bring to the game. So we're building the new headquarters for the Thunderbird School of Global Management. This, as Chairman Penley knows, having been the former president of this institution himself, this is one complex creature. One complex creature. Now, we've got them out of the intensive care unit, and they're in rehab. Not for chemical dependency, just for physical injuries. And so meaning that we're moving them forward, so much so that we think we can build this headquarters, and it's going to be great, and great things are going to happen. ISTB 7, the largest, most important research building we've ever built, is under construction as we speak. And for Regents, if and when we ever take a break, the model of it is over here, which is fantastic. It connects to the light rail station across into the Novus Innovation Corridor, under construction. The ASU Mesa City Center, now under construction. Investment from the city of Mesa, investment from ourselves, investment from philanthropy that we're raising, making this whole thing work. This will be an unbelievable driver of the institution's ability to help create new ways of thinking around digital technology and digital culture.
By the way, Michael, you just need to tell us when you want to take a break, okay?
You're the chairman. You tell me, because I only go to the restroom on Thursdays.
President Crow, another amazing characteristic.
16-hour clock started.
Truthfully, I don't want to disrupt what you're trying to do in terms of this to really,
Yeah.
I mean, you make the decision.
All right. Thank you.
It is your decision.
So this is under construction. We have a very large footprint. So I already mentioned Novus Innovation Corridor. That's one of 6 innovation campuses that we're advancing. SkySong is advancing. We're accelerating our planning for Polytechnic, accelerating our planning for West. We've got things going on up in the Health Solutions Corridor at the Mayo Hospital in North Phoenix. Fantastic new facility under construction there. All these things are moving forward at the same time. So the complexity is, what is your managerial limit? Well, we may be at it, near it. We're sort of, occasionally staggering from being around this thing, and then, something fails, and then you get a little more room. Something succeeds, and you get a little more room. And so it is a function of those two things going on, and managing that is difficult. So we have these different innovation zones. I won't walk you through each of them, other than to say to the Regents that each and every one of them are an unbelievable economic development opportunity, an opportunity for Arizona, an opportunity for partnerships, an opportunity for attracting businesses and companies, all of which we are experiencing in very positive ways already. You already know about our physical locations in other spots. Just to remind the Regents, LA is the global city that we're the closest to. The economy of Los Angeles County in 2020 will exceed $800 billion. It's one of the, so we talk about population, which is important, and economic success, which is important. Their economic growth rate is unbelievable. And so we want to be a piece of that and a part of that and connected to that. We're involved globally. I won't walk you through it, but there's few places that you can imagine. We have someone connected to us in one way or another from 195 countries. Your Arizona State University now has offices in Moscow, Dubai, Geneva, Ho Chi Minh City, Jakarta, Seoul, Tokyo. Some are
Nairobi.
small. What?
Nairobi.
So not Mars yet.
Not till the rover lands.
Lots of external partnerships, some of which are massive and accelerating and moving forward. In fact, I'm working personally on one of these right now, one that will be transformative if we pull this thing off. And I'm very excited about where we're going with this one. So our goals. So we're going to take a break right now before we turn to what we're trying to achieve before 2025. Please look at the ISTB 7 structure, and then if the Regents could turn around and say something about the audience. So if you're a dean of the university at one level or another, raise your hand. All right, if you're something that's like a vice provost, a vice president, associate vice president, something like that, raise your hand. So these are the people that run this place. And so they're the tackles and the linebackers and so forth. And so they're also here, and they'll be a part of where we're going relative to questions and so forth. So let's take not more than a 5-minute break.
Go have a drink?
If everybody could take their seats, please. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm not drinking it today. Or I might have
The drum roll. We'll get started as soon as the regents return to their seats, so if everybody else could return to their seats, please. So I'm going to take up now the issue of our 2025 goals. There'll be nothing necessarily new about this except how we're adjusting our organizational design, our organizational structure, our basic fundamental premise to be able to achieve them. And I've been telegraphing this to the regents for some time, and so let's walk through it. So there's the old spider chart with goals that were set some time ago. The regents are looking at this, whether or not this should move forward. We're making progress, so we started on gold in 08 and 09. Gray is the goal. We're making steady progress on all of these. We then have our particular approach is to pursue specific goals in these 4 categories. The first, demonstrate leadership in academic excellence and accessibility. Those 2 things are supposed to be contrarian to each other in many institutions. Establish national standing. So if we are accessible and our programs are not ranked in the upper tier of academic performance, we failed. The institution has failed. Establish ASU as a global center for interdisciplinary research. Again, a differentiated goal. We think that this is attainable by 2025 and enhance our local impact in the communities that we serve. So then these goals, you've seen them all before. The 2 most important things are these first 2 bullets. Maintain the fundamental principle of accessibility to all students qualified to study at a research university. That is, we set the threshold for admission, University of California standards of August 10th, 1950. Those are our standards. To attend that university, that, by the way, was the model, the epitome of the great model of a public university. We maintain those standards. Then maintain university accessibility to match Arizona's socioeconomic diversity. Now, in California in 1950, they didn't do that, and in Arizona in 1950, they didn't do that. We're now able to do both of these things, and we weren't able to do them before. And then if you don't have the freshmen persist, what good are you? Failure. So success for us, we're not yet successful. So the stress, when I'm dead and gone, the one thing they'll say is that he was just weird. He just never gave up on these stupid little goals. I told him a long time ago that 90% wasn't attainable. This wasn't Provost Searle, but Provost Capaldi told me this many, many times. 90% wasn't achievable. It will be achieved. I'm telling you, it will be achieved. We're making tremendous progress right now because we're learning more and adapting more and moving forward. So there are internal discussions, internal arguments, internal challenges, successes, failures, things that worked, things that didn't work, things that moved quickly, things that moved at the wrong time. This is a very complicated place. Enhance graduation rate, lower the cost of a degree while enhancing quality. We have done that and are doing that, and we haven't taken it off the goal. It means we need to continue to do that. Enroll 100,000 online and distance education degree-seeking students. We think that number is too small. That number will be easily attained. We're 60% of our way there. The market is bigger than we thought it was. The total addressable market is almost insatiable. The competition is rising but inadequate. You get that competition? Inadequate. Enhance measured student development and individual student learning to national leadership levels, meaning we're leading in the production of outstanding college graduates across a whole spectrum of fields. And then lastly, and this one was new, I'm sorry to build up to this way, but engage all learners on all levels, including people who are not students at the university. What do we have sitting inside our midst, this highly privileged institution? What do we have that someone else could benefit from? And it would take nothing away from us. So I see that Jim is gone, the university librarian is gone, but he has users of this library from 150 countries. Here he comes. Jim, I'm talking about you. So we have users, and so learners, anyone, anywhere, that can find something that we have that's useful. Maybe we can reconfigure it a little way. Maybe we can take a course that our college students are taking and make that available to an electrician who wants to understand electrical engineering a little bit better. Or maybe we've got some course in fundamental accounting that would be really, really valuable for somebody, or some kind of digital photography course that would just hugely inspire a high school student or a 65-year-old person that's thinking about their next career. Engage all learners on all levels. And one of the things that's happened with universities sociologically is that we've become elitist, snobbish institutions cut off from the rest of society. And many that have college educations look down upon people that don't have college educations, which turns out to be the vast majority of the population does not have a college degree, nor will they for some time. So we have squandered our privilege. And so we added this as now something we can do. Can you be academically excellent? We are. Can you also be accessible across the broad demographic? We are. Can you then, once you've done that with the technological assets that we have, can you reach others that need what the university might have without a barrier, a transactional barrier? We think we can. National standing. I will tell you that our schools and programs, I don't see the dean of the law school is here. Is he hiding? Probably, I think they're right in the middle of their admissions because I know he's calling every single student that was admitted. So the law school is a fantastic school. It's gone up in the rankings. It's performing at the highest level. It's fantastic facilities, all these things there. So we're doing this with every one of our schools. So if we don't have national standing for each of our colleges in the top 5%, like, why are we here? Pack it in. This is unbelievably challenging to pull this off with the level of resources that we have and the level of complexity that we have. Establish ASU as a global center for interdisciplinary research. Well, we spent a lot of time talking about that. We are that now. There are several things in the work. The biggest things that we've ever done, the biggest research facilities, the biggest research initiatives, the establishment of the University Office for Global Futures, the appointment of a University Vice President for Global Futures, other things that we're going to be bringing forth to the board as we continue to evolve. This place is on fire relative to our ability to become a global center for interdisciplinary research, discovery, and development. Now, we already know that the University of Arizona is a globally powerful, unbelievably successful research university. Arizona didn't need another one of those. It has one. We decided to go on a different path, on a different trajectory, and organize ourselves around interdisciplinary frameworks. That is a non-trivial exercise intellectually. Our faculty have embraced this. They've been unbelievably creative, unbelievably empowering, and helping to make these kinds of things happen. Enhance our local impact and social embeddedness. Now, this last thing that I put in green at the bottom, meet the needs of 21st century learners. We never thought about that as an objective of the university. We never held that as an objective of the university. We only said meet the needs of 21st, of the students. Learner here doesn't mean degree-seeking student. The use of the word learner from this part of the conversation forward means not a degree-seeking student. It means a person that needs something to advance or improve their life. Now, we cannot be all things to all people, so don't offer that criticism. We already know that. No one can do that. No institution can do that. But we have a lot of stuff that people could benefit from. A lot of stuff that people could benefit from. And so here what we say, launch a universal learner initiative by increasing individual success through personalized learning pathways and promoting adaptability to all accelerated socio-technical changes. What we mean by that is everything's changing. Rate of technological change, rate of economic competitiveness, rate of all things is changing. How can we take the 30,000 staff that we have and the 75,000 students that we have on campus? Some of the staff are also students, so a little double count there, but nonetheless, roughly 100,000 people. Can we take those 100,000 people and say to anybody else that's out there, particularly in Arizona, we're here to help you. What do you need? There's a way to do that now. We never had that way before because we're able to technologically project the institution. These are our assignments from you all. We're the ones in the gold line. We have a significant assignment from the board. Blue is University of Arizona, a stable, mature institution. And NAU's assignment, a different kind of institution. So our assignment was roll. Roll with growth, roll with change, roll with the punches. Do not base yourself on only the successful traditional model. All those successful traditional models, unlike in business, will all be maintained. Haverford College is not going away. Bowdoin College is not going away. Not going anywhere. It will live as it has. Those Bowdoin College has lived since the 1790s. I used to be a trustee of that college. It will be here 300 years from now doing exactly what it's doing. And I don't know what it'll cost. All in now, the term bill is about $75K per year for our student regents, per year. $75K. So what will it take? One, total abandonment of the state control model. 95%, 99% of all public universities operate under this model. Not falling into the special trance of the cobra snake called the market model, where we seek profit maximization, return on investment, as the means by which the institution is measured successful. So these have not been successful yet in the for-profit sector. So we are the pioneer, or one of the pioneers, of the enterprise model. I've showed you this slide before, but what will it take is we have to operate in that modality, which means then back to the regents, you have three very different institutions operating in completely different cultures and completely different environments. So the normal academic enterprise, teaching and so forth and so on, here's what we were, and here's how we've grown, and we're continuing to grow. Now we've added to that the notion of us as a knowledge enterprise. I've talked about that before. Us acting to create new knowledge, solve problems, make things happen. Adding our enterprise partners, which then allows us to advance. Just think of this as the scale of the institution and the rate of change of the institution. Adding to that, what we now call the learning enterprise is us now approaching non-students and their learners. And then we turn to this, which is our structure going forward. So several, yes. Microphone, so everybody can hear you.
Just given the incredible pace of growth, just the volume and the anticipated continued growth, how do you continue to assure that the quality is there?
Well, so we measure it. So our value of our degrees in the marketplace are equal to the degrees from the University of Washington, the University of Texas, the University of California at Los Angeles, the University of California at Berkeley. So we have measured outcomes. We have comparables. We know that we have their tax returns. We have tax returns of our students. And so we know that our online students are being hired. We know what salaries they're being hired at. So we have those measurements. We assess students and their learning outcomes and courses and degree programs and so forth. So this thing about size and quality, it's a misnomer. The misnomer. You have problems with size and quality if you don't have technology. Now you got a real problem. And so this is a Mark wants. You want to say something about this?
Well, I want to point out that size and quality. I'm not quite sure we conflate the two as being in competition with each other. In Canada, the largest institution in the country is the University of Toronto. It's on 3 campuses. It's a top 20 global institution. Most institutions would love to be as good as the University of Toronto. And nobody questions the fact that they've got 80,000 students.
85,000, no. Yes.
So I have a hard time kind of dealing with it. I know that's normative, but I don't understand how we got there thinking that size was so directly equated to this.
So size for us is a function of the numbers of programs that we have. We have hundreds of degree programs, 20 colleges, give or take, 150 academic units, give or take. Each one of them is the size that they need to be to still be successful. Some are small, some are huge, some are medium-sized, whatever they need to be. And so we're an amalgamation, like the University of Toronto is. We're an amalgamation of a series of colleges inside this very large university that's operating without a system-level bureaucratic hierarchy that we're paying for, operating without massive administrative structure, let's say like the University of Missouri with 4 campuses that we have more students than, produce more graduates than, and do more research than, all of the campuses of the University of Missouri combined. And so we have a completely different structure. But there's this built-in this notion going all the way back to Bowdoin College, that a small, quaint New England college on the coast of Maine, where you're sitting in small classrooms and talking to each other for $75,000 a year, is what the idealized form of success is. It is a form of success. It's not the form of success that we can pursue. We must pursue scale with quality outcomes that we do measure. So I'm going to ask a couple of the deans, and so what dean have I not called on yet? I'm going to talk to Fred Corey, who's a vice provost, managing all kinds of things related to everything that we're working on. How do we know our kids are successful?
We ask them. We keep track those students very carefully. It's funny, I want to go back to that notion of size, is that inside the university, it doesn't feel that big. We have individual personal contact with all of our students. We're on 4 campuses. We create lots of little communities, and I think that's where we get high quality feedback on how they're doing. And when they disappear, we proactively go out to find them. We reach out to say what's happening.
Yeah, I think Phil Regere's not here, but Mark, I'll ask you then relative to online students, human touch.
So as Regents heard yesterday, we believe that both the high tech and high touch have to go together. And as Phil was reporting, our coaches are the preferred way our students like to communicate with their coaches is by phone, so they can talk. We've now introduced Zoom technology to students, so now they'll be able to actually see and talk. Which will be a new feature for them, but it allows them yet another dimension of engagement. And then they also have contact with their faculty members, both digitally, and they can also call their faculty members just like every other student can call their faculty member. Or
Zoom and see them face to face. So yeah. Technology has given us, I don't see our CTO here, but our Zoom license must be massive.
It is.
In terms of what we allow it to be. So. It's going to be much larger soon.
Yes.
As we learn. So Jim O'Donnell, how many users do we have in the library online? Estimated.
Total users online, essentially everybody. Countries from which our ASU log in. Countries from which our ASU users log in to use the system, 178. You said 195, so that tells me we got 17 more countries to do some selling in.
So scale is if anything, so the quality of the institution when it had no scale was not what the quality of the institution is now that it has scale overall. So this is actually what we've been asked to do. This is the central thing we've been asked to do. Yes.
Following up on Regent Taylor Robeson's question, in terms of E&G expenditure, in terms of cutting down on staff for efficiency, how do you differentiate between efficiency and diminishing the value that students get?
So the 3 terms are efficiency, effectiveness, and efficacy. So the 3 concepts then are related to each other and not the same. Efficiency is the measure of units of input versus units of output for which we're extremely effective. We are unbelievably efficient. I doubt that there's many that are as efficient as we are. Effectiveness is then the measurement of the attainment of the goals of the institution. In our case, efficacy means the product. Did we produce significant learning outcomes? And so we don't drive efficiency as the objective. Our principal objective is student success. Our students are more successful now, graduating in larger numbers with more diversity and higher quality across all of our programs than in any given day in the previous entire existence of the institution. And so that's true in engineering, even though we've grown up. So before we started these changes, 32% of our freshman engineers didn't retain in the university. They left in their freshman year. Now that's only about 10%. That is an efficaciously positive outcome because then they either stay at the university or they stay in engineering at the university, but they don't depart. So all of those things. And so we're not driven by efficiency. We're driven by the success of our students, which is why we have the earlier stated graduation rates, freshman retention rates, success rates. So the graduation rate of the institution in 1987 for 4 years was 12%. The graduation rate of an institution that has a similar mission to parts of our mission, the California State University system with 23 campuses and 500,000 students, averaged a year ago 18.9% as a 4-year graduation rate. Our 4-year graduation rate is in the mid-50s, approaching the mid-50s, and even higher for our A students. So we won't spend much time on this in this meeting. This has been talked about a lot. The most important thing here is, one, I was authorized to use a title several years ago that I've never used by the board called the CEO of the ASU Enterprise, in addition to being the university president, and we're going to move in that direction because the ASU Enterprise now, 2020 launch, will be made up of these things. One, a new overall strategy and plan supported by the ASU Enterprise Strategy and Planning Office that Maria Anguiano will head up, supported by the arm's length separate 501c3 ASU Enterprise partners, and then the university will functionally operate below the level of these senior officers who operate at the macro level under 3 enterprise flags. The enterprise, academic enterprise led by the university provost, the knowledge enterprise led by the executive vice president, and the learning enterprise, which is being designed. I'm chairing that design. Maria Anguiano is vice chairing that design, and we've hired a managing director to help us launch that design. That is then all people pursuing learning, give or take. These are difficult. Nothing here is certain, who are not students pursuing degrees. They are other learners. All of this will be underpinned by Ed Plus at ASU, which is a one-of-a-kind unit, both within this institution, and most institutions don't have this, then supporting everything. We'll continue to expand our research portfolio to the level of MIT. That's our objective. So MIT is set as the objective because it is, their number is quite a bit higher than this now, so our number will have to get higher also. Not for the sake of getting higher, but for the sake of having that level of impact. Why can't Phoenix have an MIT level research enterprise, knowledge enterprise? We'll continue to drive growth in undergraduate enrollment. Here's some of the most recent. We're investing in more technology, increase in campus visitors, increase in admission-related web traffic, increase in applications. This is this year over last year. This is our projection. Continuing to drive innovation in all of these areas. So the rate of innovation is accelerating. I keep saying this to regents. This then goes to another risk within the institution. The institution has to maintain a culture of innovation, or it will not be able to achieve its objective. Because the objective here is growth and success at social scale, which is not attainable. All this slide shows you is that on one side, the traditional structure is kind of linear relative to people's ages. And this is the way that traditional education works. ASU of the future and ASU of the present will be looking across all these ages, involved in different kinds of learners, helping through our digital prep school districts in Arizona to have access to assets that they don't have the means to develop on their own, helping people that are 65 years old and want to get a graduate degree, or want to get working with community colleges on associate degrees and so forth. So this is trying to show you a non-linear projection. You saw this slide yesterday, Regents did, which are the hundreds of companies that we're working with to build our learning platform. Then going forward, the year ending, the year that we're in, next year, we're up approaching $6 billion in revenue. You can see the revenue mix, how this will work, how this moves forward. Now, this is a heavy lift, making things like this work. Very, very heavy lift. And this is what it takes to meet our goals. So we don't have any financial goals. We have productivity goals. We have output goals. This is the finances necessary to meet the goals. And by the way, typically you just go talk to the people that give you the black line, and they give you the money and you do it. Enterprise partners will be accelerating their contribution through a number of initiatives. This is likely to greatly accelerate. ASU and EP, this is where we are in terms of projected revenues. That's where we were in 2002. That's where we were last year. It was highly unusual. An example is what we're doing in engineering. So we did away with our normal departments. We created 5 Grand Challenge schools. We created school number 6, the Polytechnic School, which has 5,800 students, including its online students. We have this new initiative that we're announcing next month through our 2 partners, which is headquartered in London, where we're going to have students going there and students coming from there and faculty going there and coming there, this thing that we call the Engineering and Design Institute. And then we already know that we're going to build at least one other, if not 2 other, but one new engineering school around what we think is a central theme of where we need to go relative to our combined socio-technological future. So imagine that it might have something to do with bits and bytes as they move along, electrons and are counted, so you can imagine whatever that is. And so that's where we're headed. This is where we're going with engineering, to a 40,000 student engineering college, which we think would change the economic trajectory of this region dramatically. I'm just using this as an example. The expansion of the faculty, the expansion of the research activities. I don't know if we can pull all of this off or not, but we're willing to try it. The science and technology centers that are in the governor's new economy initiative budget. How do we get more of these things going to lay the foundation for future industries? And science and technology, by the way, doesn't mean science as in only physical science, natural science, but behavioral sciences, cultural contributions, all kinds of things. And so the regional STCs, I've showed this slide earlier in the presentation. This is one of the things that we're building. This is the specifics of the new economy initiative specific to ASU, the broader set of initiatives, but in our case, development and expansion of our education programs that add to the workforce and its competitiveness for 21st century, the expansion of the establishment of 5 seeds for 5 science and technology centers, and growing the Fulton Schools of Engineering to the largest and most successful engineering school yet to have been constructed anywhere. What's the return on investment for Arizona for this whole operation? Extremely significant. So, that's it. That's where we're headed. That's what we're doing. And I know we have a lot of strategic level questions, tactical level questions, operational level questions. Happy to deal with some of those now and then also in the session.
Thank you very much, President Crow. Board members, do you have some questions you want to ask Dr. Crow at this point? We have another, I think, 15 minutes, right, Michael?
And then we have a session with me. Yeah. Can you use the microphone, Regent, right now, so the rest of the... Well, but the people that are watching and analyzing us and...
So I'm going to go back to one of the first slides that we had on Arizona's relative prosperity and the decreasing per capita.
Yeah.
So you lay ASU over that and everything ASU is doing. So how is ASU in the end going to move that needle?
So Jim Rounds, who did an economic analysis just of the proposed engineering investment, says that just by producing more engineers, just that one thing of all the many things that we're doing, but just that one thing, I'm going to get back to the slide, will add a $50 billion base to the annual economy of the state of Arizona just by that one investment within 20 years. And so that's this slide here. And so those engineers then, based on economic models, economic projections, workforce development models, and so forth, then help to drive up our ability to create more high-wage jobs. And so we've done that calculation through that economist. This is another part of that same slide here. How do we at least move to the level of economic opportunity and per capita GDP of the U.S. This is GDP. And so how do we cross that line and become one of the leading economic centers as opposed to one that's not even at the U.S. average, which is different than population.
Yeah. So following up on that, and this is a conversation that we had with Jim when he originally came to the board, but seeing as how the demographics of Arizona is continuously changing, we're seeing an increase in the Latinx community in Arizona, and then seeing as how the Latinx community is also disparaged in college attainment rates, and furthermore that the state of Arizona in and of itself struggles with mathematic attainment from the high school level. How does ASU plan to kind of deal with the discrimination between the two races and then also the discrimination between mathematic competency coming into the university?
So we look at this as a perhaps derivative of what you call discrimination. We look at it as a problem to solve. And so what we're doing is we're taking every asset that we have and driving it down into high schools and so forth. So I know Jim Rund is here, Dr. Rund is here. So Jim, what are we doing with ASU? So Senior Vice President Rund is responsible for educational opportunity and student success. He has a range of vice presidents that report for him and team activities that report to him. And one of his assignments is to not the only officer within the institution, but is to deploy our ASU digital prep tool to students in every community without any consideration of their economic or social dynamics, empowering them, particularly in math and science. And so what have we done? Where are we on all of that? So.
Well, first, part of our interest in running our own schools was to demonstrate a new model of success for schools in Arizona. We took over a failing school in the heart of Phoenix. It was a closed school. It had been failing elementary school for 3 years consecutive. We took that building over and built a whole school, K through 12, with essentially the same student demographics there. 75% free and reduced lunch, 80% students of color. We now have, for the 4th year in a row, 100% high school graduation and 100% post-secondary participation.
100% post-secondary participation.
Because there's talent, there's smart kids everywhere. There's smart kids in every community and in every household and in every neighborhood, but they don't all have the equal access to opportunity because of the asset disparity. Local school districts are funded by property tax.
So talk about digital prep and how it scales.
As an extension of the efforts to improve school outcomes, we built an online high school. At present, we have 22,000 students enrolled, many from around the state of Arizona. We're not recruiting students from Arizona schools. We're partnering with Arizona schools to augment their curriculum, to assist in improving better outcomes. The entire 9th grade in the Yuma Unified School District is utilizing our digital math curriculum
and then
to
what's
get
the
better
outcome?
outcomes.
Let's talk about the outcome. So Yuma is a economically challenged community, a highly diverse community, and what's the math outcome?
Well, improved year over year the last 2 years, and so they're encouraged by the utilization of digital curriculum. We did the professional development to train their teachers so they'd know how to use the curriculum effectively, and so we're doing various partnerships like that all over the state, rural and urban.
So back on campus, our student body never was and now is representative of the ethnic diversity of the state, but we didn't use ethnic diversity goals to attain that. We eliminated financial barriers to attain that. And then once we eliminated the financial barrier, all of the ethnic diversity that one sees in the unbelievably diverse Arizona that we know then shows up. Because in the former design of the institution with a low tuition and no financial aid, there was no way to attend. It makes no difference how low the tuition is if there's no money for the kid to be able to go to college. It's different than that. So we figured that out and we implemented that. In engineering, we have added thousands and thousands of students, and we're producing orders of magnitude, actually literally an order of magnitude more minority engineering students than we were in the past. Nancy, are you familiar with in science, how we're doing in science, since the Regent asked questions about math and science? Use the microphone, please. It's a broadcasted event.
We're tackling the issue of science education and equitable science education, I'd say, at every level. In terms of really trying to think of innovative pedagogical practices to bring into the classroom, sort of thinking about pathways from high school to the college, making sure students have extra opportunities to be prepared. We're thinking about the online environment and how do we make sure that we're addressing the challenges of the online student who comes in with a very different level of preparedness.
And then how do we even this out? So the kid is just as smart, just as capable, just as driven, like a lot of the kids that I grew up with, but they didn't have a good math teacher in high school. There was no math teacher in high school, or the math teacher actually taught them math in the wrong way. So rather than punish that child, which is what happens, how do we accommodate that? And you might comment, so Dean Gonzalez is a native of Arizona, went to ASU, got her PhD at the University of Washington, and is familiar with perhaps what the university used to be like. versus what the university is like now. So
Yeah, I was a first-gen student, attended ASU at the time when the demographics looked drastically different. If you look
All
up
gray.
on that graph, all gray, yeah. You know, we have, again, I say we've approached it at many, many levels, but we are really trying to change the nature of how we teach so that it's better engaging students in all of our science disciplines, really helping them connect with the reason for being a math major, providing them a lot of tutoring. We've invested significantly in tutoring centers. We've changed the nature of our classes.
by the way, it's different than remedial. Remedial is a derogatory term used by elitists to hold other people back to make sure that they don't advance.
We've used a lot of peer mentoring, which has really made a big difference as well. So we've really tried to change the nature of what we're doing so it's better meeting the needs of our diverse students.
So, Mark Searle, so we spent a boatload of money on, and maybe Nancy, you might want to comment on this also, to build a science spine of everything that it takes to be an undergraduate biology major. That is 12 courses, 36 total hours. So maybe you and Nancy could talk about what that is and what Mike did to help make that happen, our new president's professor. And this, I think, Regent Russ, goes to your so once we've developed, as we've developed these things, there's no more barrier. The barrier is eliminated.
Well, I think that the most important thing here was that the technology was purchased, if you like, but the intellectual creativity came from the faculty to design and build this in a way so that you had a sequence set of courses that students could, within course, be reminded of issues that they forgot from course 2 when they were in course 5, and rebuild that skill if necessary so they can continue.
A computational tutor going back and helping the person through what they might not have gotten in course 1 or course 2. But what's the motivation of the faculty? Maybe Nancy can talk about it. So why would our faculty decide to do this? I mean, it's not. This is like above and beyond what many faculties around the country are doing. So our life sciences faculty, led by a particularly energetic person, supported by our Ed Plus team, deploys this asset which will transform the learning of biology at the high school level, because we can now navigate that down to high school, at the college level. And so this notion of becoming a science major now could be attainable by anyone we admit. And anyone that's in high school in Arizona or anyone else that we touch, we can help them overcome all these barriers. So what was the motivation of the faculty?
Well, the faculty are completely energized by this opportunity to transform the educational experience. It really did require, first of all, the leadership of this guy, Mike Angeletta, kind of pulling all the faculty in because they had to redesign all of biology. So we had to really understand what it meant in all biology classes, what are your learning outcomes, and then line them up and then redesign courses.
So a point
in
there.
an adaptive learning platform.
Just to interrupt just for a second. So it turns out that the normal way that biology is taught by PhDs teaching biology means if you didn't learn in a certain way, or you don't have a brain that works in a certain way, even if you're smart and capable and unbelievably creative and could be a master biologist, you will not succeed because it is presented in a particularly cultural way that has to be overcome. And I'm not talking about ethnic culture. I'm talking about academic culture, which is perhaps related to ethnic culture, but let's set that aside. We're trying to find our way around that.
Yeah. So it's as I said, the whole faculty in the School of Life Sciences, and we have over 100 faculty in that unit, have become really excited about the potential to do this differently. And they see the opportunity for being able to address some of the issues that you're raising around equity and access and really promoting student success. And that innovative thinking, I'll say, has transferred across units. Now all the sciences are really energized around the way to use technology to rethink education, to have different outcomes for a broader range of the population.
So maybe, Chairman Penley, just a very quick lightning round that will address some of what the regents had asked me earlier. So if I call your name, you're going to give me 1 or 2 words of the thing you're most anxious about. It's going to be, you can't lie or anything because it's going to be so fast because you don't know who I'm going to call. So let's take Carol Basile. You're taking too long. You're thinking about it too long. 1 or 2 words. What are you worried about?
Further, faster.
Further, faster. Maria Anguiano.
Competition and capital.
Competition and capital. So back to Jim O'Brien, University Chief of Staff.
Communication.
Communication. Let's go to Joanne Vogel, who's our interim vice president for student affairs. Faster. Moving too slowly.
Supportive, personalized.
Support and personalize. So let's see. We'll go to our sustainability dean,
Increasing competition, crowded field.
our social science dean,
Alternative career pathways.
Sue Quant,
Next set of academic innovations.
Jose,
Really? It would not be privileged.
Morgan,
Organizational performance.
Bruce Neville, who's the head of facilities as one of Morgan's deputies, former Navy CB captain who we bring in to try to make this place work.
Where's the leak in the 80 miles of underground utilities and tunnels on this campus?
Which means we have very significant infrastructure issues and underinvestment over decades and decades and decades without public support for decades that we have inherited this damn system. So, yeah, let's see, Joanne Walmsley, Vice President for Business. So, Matt Smith, our new Vice President for Budget, who joined us from Brown University.
A fourth industrial revolution.
Kevin Salcido, who's our Chief Human Resources Officer.
Recruiting and retaining staff talent.
So is that easy?
Not in this labor market.
These are all stresses and strains and so forth. So those are all things that we worry about. Rich Stanley, who's, brings this New England logic to us, and so.
Not letting the resource constraints slow down all the opportunities that exist.
I mean, plow ahead and see what happens.
Yeah.
Is that the normal, Rich?
Risk management.
Risk management. Risk management. Christine.
Engagement and affinity.
Affinity is a very important issue for us that we're putting a lot of energy into. Affinity to the university, affinity to the idea of the university, the linkage of the university, the way the university works, all those kinds of things. So,
Thank you very much, President Crow, and thanks to all of you who've joined us here today and provided a part of this. The board especially appreciates the opportunity to have this operational and financial review. We are proud of Arizona State University, excited about what all of you are doing to make this institution even more efficacious, even more efficient, even more exceptional in every sort of way. So thank you very much. This gives us a good opportunity to look in depth at the university to see where you're going, how you're trying to do that. There are a lot of data behind this, as all of you know very well, but it's been especially instructive, I think, this morning. So thank you, President Crow. We appreciate it.
thank you. Thank you, everybody.